All right, this week we are continuing our focus on the writing trait of ideas, this time looking at how to develop ideas and make research questions. So by the end of this lesson, you will be able to define research and research questions, explain how to use these to develop ideas, and create research questions to plan your own research. Your keywords are research and research questions. Writing is a process. This process is dependent on ideas. So we start the process by finding an idea, either through brainstorms or by responding to an assignment prompt. Then we focus this idea. We've practiced focusing the idea through working thesis statements, and now we need to work on developing this idea. And this requires research, otherwise known as the process of seeking out credible information. Research works best when it's organized, which means you want an idea of what you're looking for before you start researching. This is called a research plan. Typically, this involves coming up with two sets of information: what you need to know, which we find in research questions, and how to find what you need to know, which we do with keywords. This time, we're just focusing on the first bit, creating research questions. So research questions are just questions that you want answered in your paper. And to create these, you would want to go back to your working thesis statement and complete a KWT chart, otherwise known as a know-want T chart. You guys have seen KWL charts perhaps in the past, where you know, want, learn. The learning part is the research, so we're reducing that just down to a KW chart. Once you've got items in your W side of your KW chart, you're going to want to turn those things into a question. So, if you're working from a prompt, one thing you need to make sure you do is consider all of the elements of the prompt when you're filling out your T chart. And this should leave you with a list of things that you need to know before you can write your paper. Let's take a quick look at an example. You have to start with your working thesis statement. So for an example thesis statement here, I have: the Golden Rule is a valuable tool that strengthens communities through creating tolerance, building compassion, and reducing conflict. This gives us a topic in the Golden Rule, and it gives us a main idea that this is a valuable tool that strengthens communities, and supporting points of creating tolerance, building compassion, and reducing conflict. Now we need to make sure that we've identified the big ideas. The big ideas for this particular prompt would be creating tolerance, building compassion, and reducing conflict. This means you need to now fill out your K side. Your K side is what you fill out with things that you already know. The Golden Rule means to treat others the way we want to be treated ourselves. We know the Golden Rule makes you think about whether or not you'd want to be treated the way you're acting, and that this means we'll think about how others are feeling. We know that tolerance means accepting people's differences, and that compassion means to think about others' feelings and be nice to them. We also know that conflict happens when people aren't listening to each other and doing the things we've already talked about. So, what do we want to know? What might we need to know to write this paper? And that would start with, what are some examples of the way we do not use the Golden Rule in our communities? What are some examples of intolerance in our communities? What are some examples of needing to be compassionate? And what are some conflicts that are happening right now that we could be made better if we listened more and were more tolerant and compassionate? Following this now, we have a list that gives us things to research where we're looking for specific examples that will help us develop our ideas. And this means that we need to remember that research is best accomplished when we begin it with a plan, and that research plan starts with questions you develop from your working thesis statement, otherwise known as research questions, which list the things you need to know or want to know before you can start writing your paper.